The salt spray hit Lieutenant Commander Zara, Ghostwing, Volkov's face like frozen needles as she emerged from the Pacific's churning waters, her flight suit torn and bloodied, clutching something metallic against her chest. The rescue boat crews who spotted her walking along the Aleutian coastline at 3:47 hours couldn't believe their instruments. According to every radar screen, weather satellite and search protocol in the Navy's arsenal, she should have been dead for 16 hours. The debris field they'd been combing stretched across 47 nautical miles. Twisted aluminum, scattered avionics, fuel slicks that caught the Arctic sunrise like oil paintings of destruction. Two FA-18F Super Hornets had gone down in what meteorologists were calling the worst storm system to hit the North Pacific in 30 years. The other pilot, Commander Marcus "Reaper" Sullivan, had ejected successfully and been recovered within 4 hours, suffering hypothermia and a dislocated shoulder. But Ghostwing's aircraft had simply vanished into a wall of black water and lightning that the weather radar couldn't penetrate. No one could survive that dive, General Patricia Hawthorne had told the search teams after 18 hours of fruitless searching. The words would later haunt her, spoken with the casual certainty of someone who'd never watched the ocean swallow her wingman whole. But Zara Volkov had always been underestimated. Born in a Siberian mining town to a family that fled to Alaska when she was 7, she'd learned early that survival meant being forgotten until the moment you proved everyone wrong. The metallic object pressed against her ribs was a flight data recorder, not hers. The black box belonged to an aircraft that wasn't supposed to exist, from a mission that had never been officially authorized. As the rescue teams wrapped thermal blankets around her shivering shoulders, Zara's dark eyes held secrets that would reshape everything the Pentagon thought they knew about the waters off Alaska's coast. Her lips were blue from cold, but her voice remained steady as she spoke her first words to the medic leaning over her. "I need to speak to Admiral Chen. Tell him the Siberians kept their promise." The medic later said her words felt like a prayer and a threat delivered in the same breath. Lieutenant Commander Zara Volkov had joined the Navy at 19, carrying nothing but a dog-eared copy of Yeager's autobiography and the kind of quiet determination that made instructors either love or despise their cadets. At the Naval Academy, she'd been that Russian girl, always a beat behind in conversations about American pop culture, always a step ahead in aerodynamics and tactical theory. Her accent had faded over the years, but something in her eyes remained foreign, untouchable. Flight school had been brutal. Not because she lacked skill, Zara could thread an FA-18 through a thunderstorm like a needle through silk, but because she refused to play the games that advancement required. She didn't drink with the boys, didn't laugh at their jokes about female pilots, didn't pretend to be impressed by their stories of conquest, aerial or otherwise. Instead, she studied weather patterns like sheet music, memorized every bolt and rivet of her aircraft, and flew with a precision that made veteran pilots nervous. Ghostwing, they'd started calling her after a training exercise over Nevada. She disappeared from radar for 17 minutes, reappearing behind an entire squadron of enemy aircraft without triggering a single alarm. The nickname stuck, though never warmly. Ghosts weren't supposed to be real pilots. They were supposed to be stories told in ready rooms, legends that made reality seem inadequate by comparison. Her commanding officers wrote evaluations that praised her technical skills while questioning her team integration and communication style. Translation: she was too good to dismiss, too foreign to trust completely. Zara had learned to read between the lines of Navy bureaucracy the way she read cloud formations, by watching for the patterns that predicted storms ahead. The morning of her final training mission at Miramar, Zara had stood before her locker, looking at a photograph of her father. Dmitry Volkov had died in an Alaskan fishing accident when she was 16, but she could still hear his voice. In Russia, we have saying the nail that stands up gets hammered down. In America, maybe different. Maybe standing up means something else. She taped the photo inside her helmet that day, a ritual she'd continued through 8 years of active duty. Her promotion to lieutenant commander had come with assignment to the USS Gerald R. Ford, where she'd finally found something resembling acceptance among a crew too busy to care about accents or origins. The ship's air wing needed pilots who could handle the increasingly complex missions along the Pacific Rim, where Chinese expansion and Russian provocations created a chess game played at Mach 2. But even there, Zara remained an outsider by choice, respected but never truly trusted with the kind of classified operations that made careers. Until 3 weeks ago, when Admiral David Chen had called her into his office with an assignment that would change everything. Admiral Chen had been expecting Zara's call from the moment the rescue teams radioed her impossible survival. He'd been packing his Pentagon office for 6 hours, drinking coffee that had gone cold before dawn, staring at satellite imagery that raised more questions than answers. When his secure line finally rang, he answered before the first chime finished. "Admiral, this is Ghostwing. I have the package." The words sent ice through Chen's veins. The package wasn't supposed to exist. 3 weeks earlier, he'd assigned Zara to what should have been a routine patrol mission along the Aleutian chain, with one small addition: a detour to investigate unusual sonar readings near a set of coordinates that appeared in no official Navy database. The readings had been flagged by an automated system, buried in routine intelligence reports, until a junior analyst with too much curiosity and too little supervision had brought them to Chen's attention. "Are you secure?" Chen asked, his voice carefully neutral despite the encrypted line. "Negative, multiple ears, but the ravens remember their nests, if you understand." Chen understood. Ravens remember their nests. The code phrase they'd established meant Zara had found something significant at the coordinates, something that connected to Operation Blackbird, a classified program that had supposedly been terminated in 1987. A program that had involved experimental Soviet aircraft and collaborative intelligence gathering in the final years of the Cold War. "Medical is routing you to Anchorage. I'll have people waiting." "Admiral," Zara's voice carried a weight that made Chen's chest tighten. The general was right. No one could survive that dive, but someone did it anyway 38 years ago. The ocean remembers everything. The line went dead, leaving Chen staring at a map of the North Pacific, where American and Soviet naval forces had once played deadly games of hide and seek among the ice floes. Somewhere in those dark waters lay the answer to questions that two governments had agreed to forget, questions that Zara Volkov had just dragged back to the surface. The flight data recorder in Zara's possession contained 14.7 hours of audio and telemetry from a Soviet Tu-22M backfire bomber that had officially never existed. The aircraft had been part of a joint intelligence operation designed to test American radar capabilities while gathering data on Pacific Storm systems that could mask ballistic missile trajectories. It was Cold War cooperation disguised as provocation, signed off on by men who'd taken their secrets to graves decades past. The bomber had crashed on March 15, 1987, during a typhoon that had provided perfect cover for the operation. Soviet naval forces had officially searched for survivors, while secretly recovering the aircraft's classified payload, experimental weather modification equipment that could seed storms or dissipate them on command. The pilot, Major Yuki Volkov, had been listed as missing in action by Soviet records, presumed dead by American intelligence. Major Yuki Volkov had been Zara's uncle. She discovered this 3 hours into her analysis of the flight recorder, sitting in a sterile debriefing room at Elmendorf Air Force Base, while technicians downloaded terabytes of data from hardware that should have degraded decades ago. The voice on the recording spoke Russian with the same Siberian accent that colored her childhood memories, using family nicknames that made her hands tremble as she translated for the stone-faced intelligence officers surrounding her. "Little Snowbird," the voice said during the final moments before impact, If you hear this someday, remember the sky belongs to those brave enough to claim it. Tell them Yuki kept flying. Snowbird had been her uncle's nickname for her during the 2 summers he'd visited Alaska before his military career made such trips impossible. He taught her to read weather patterns by watching birds, to trust her instincts when instruments failed, to understand that flying wasn't about conquering the sky but learning to dance with it. She thought those lessons came from a fishing boat captain turned mechanic. She'd never known he was one of the Soviet Union's most skilled bomber pilots. The revelation transformed everything about her survival. The coordinates Admiral Chen had sent her to investigate weren't random sonar anomalies. They were his father's final resting place, marked by debris that had somehow remained intact through nearly 4 decades of Pacific storms. The storm that had nearly killed her had been the same weather pattern that claimed her uncle's life, cyclical and predictable to anyone who understood the relationship between ocean temperatures and atmospheric pressure in that specific region of the Aleutian chain. She'd survived because Yuki Volkov had taught her to read the ocean's moods before she was 10 years old. The debriefing lasted 18 hours. Admiral Chen flew in from Washington with a team of analysts whose security clearances existed in classifications that had no official names. They dissected every second of Zara's account, cross-referenced her survival against oceanographic models, and slowly reconstructed a picture of Cold War collaboration that challenged fundamental assumptions about American-Soviet relations in the 1980s. But the technical details paled beside the human story emerging from the flight recorder. Major Yuki Volkov hadn't been flying a simple reconnaissance mission. He'd been testing a prototype navigation system designed to guide aircraft through weather systems that would blind conventional radar. The technology had been jointly developed by Soviet and American engineers, shared in secret, while both governments publicly denounced each other's military capabilities. The storm that killed him had been artificially intensified using the weather modification equipment aboard his aircraft, a final test of technology that both sides hoped would make nuclear warfare obsolete by providing alternative methods of strategic disruption. His death had ended the program, his sacrifice buried under classifications that protected 2 superpowers from admitting they'd been secretly collaborating while threatening mutual destruction. "Your uncle died trying to make the world safer," Admiral Chen told Zara as dawn broke over the Alaskan mountains. "The irony is that his sacrifice probably prevented more conflicts than it caused." Zara studied the Admiral's weathered face, seeing exhaustion and something like regret in his eyes. He died because 2 governments were too proud to admit they could work together. The technology worked, the storm modification, the navigation systems, all of it. But nobody wanted to explain why a Soviet bomber was carrying American equipment. "And now I'm carrying both," Zara said, gesturing toward the flight recorder. "Russian blood, American training, and the truth about what we could accomplish if we stopped pretending we were enemies." The room fell silent except for the humming of electronic equipment that would soon classify this conversation, beyond any freedom of information request. General Patricia Hawthorne arrived at Elmendorf at 1400 hours, her reputation preceding her like the sound of rotors beating against Arctic wind. She'd earned her stars through a combination of tactical brilliance and political savvy that made her simultaneously respected and feared throughout the Pentagon. Her specialty was managing impossible situations, the kind of crises that required someone willing to make decisions that looked insane until they proved to be genius. She found Zara in the base's flight simulator, running combat scenarios against computer-generated adversaries while waiting for the final intelligence briefings to conclude. The simulator's screens cast blue light across Zara's face as she maneuvered through a dogfight that would have challenged pilots with twice her flight hours. Hawthorne watched for 10 minutes before announcing her presence, studying the fluid way Zara adapted to changing tactical situations. "Lieutenant Commander." Zara completed her current engagement before acknowledging the general, a small act of defiance that Hawthorne noted with something resembling approval. Too many officers became obsequious in her presence, forgetting that military effectiveness required people willing to prioritize mission success over personal advancement. General, I assume this isn't a social visit. Your survival has created complications. Hawthorne activated the simulator's privacy mode, ensuring their conversation would remain unrecorded. The flight recorder you recovered contains information that could destabilize current diplomatic relations with Russia. There are people in Washington who believe it should disappear. Zara's hand stilled on the simulator controls. And you? I believe the Navy needs pilots who can navigate impossible situations. Your survival proves you possess those capabilities. Hawthorne moved closer, her voice dropping to conversational volume. But survival isn't enough. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next. Which is command of a classified program that officially doesn't exist, aircraft that aren't in any registry, missions that will never appear in your service record. Hawthorne pulled up a chair, settling in with the air of someone prepared for a long conversation. Your uncle's work didn't end when he died, Lieutenant Commander. It evolved. The revelation hit Zara like turbulence at 30,000 feet, sudden, disorienting, and impossible to ignore. The weather modification technology that had killed her uncle hadn't been abandoned after his crash. It had been refined, miniaturized, and integrated into aircraft systems that could influence atmospheric conditions on a tactical scale. Storm seeding for cover operations, fog generation for stealth approaches, wind pattern manipulation for precision drops in hostile territory. How long have you known about my connection to Major Volkov? Since your application to the Naval Academy, we've been watching your career with considerable interest. Hawthorne's admission carried no apology. Your survival skills, your weather instincts, your ability to navigate complex tactical situations, they're not coincidences. They're hereditary advantages that make you uniquely qualified for certain types of operations. Zara felt the weight of revelation settling around her like pressure changes before a storm. Her entire naval career had been influenced by genetics she'd never known she possessed, guided by admirals who understood her capabilities better than she did. The underestimation she'd experienced hadn't been prejudice. It had been protection, a way of keeping her abilities hidden until they could be properly utilized. The program your uncle died testing has been operational for 15 years. We call it Tempest Wing. 12 aircraft, 36 pilots, conducting weather-related operations in conflicts that require plausible deniability. Hawthorne handed Zara a tablet displaying aircraft specifications that made her breath catch. Modified F-35s with atmospheric manipulation systems, range extended for deep penetration missions. Stealth capabilities enhanced for operations in disputed airspace. The aircraft on the screen looked familiar yet impossible, sleek lines that suggested speed and agility, with modifications that seemed to defy conventional aerodynamics. Wing-mounted pods contained equipment for ionospheric heating. Nose cones housed atmospheric sensors capable of reading pressure variations at the molecular level. Engine modifications allowed for high-altitude operations in weather conditions that would ground conventional aircraft. My uncle's navigation system. Integrated and improved. These aircraft can fly through conditions that don't officially exist, navigate by reading atmospheric pressure differentials, and emerge from storms that enemy radar systems can't penetrate. Hawthorne's voice carried the satisfaction of someone describing a chess move planned years in advance. We need a commander who understands both the technology and the risks, someone who's survived what no one else could survive. Zara realized she was being offered everything she'd never known she wanted: command authority, cutting-edge technology, and missions that would actually matter in global security terms. But acceptance meant abandoning any hope of a normal naval career, stepping into a world where success would never be officially acknowledged, and failure would be classified beyond historical examination. Commander Marcus, Reaper, Sullivan was waiting in Zara's quarters when she returned from her meeting with General Hawthorne. He'd been released from medical observation that morning, his injuries minor enough to avoid extended hospitalization, but significant enough to excuse him from immediate duty assignments. He sat in her desk chair with the casual familiarity of someone who'd shared enough dangerous flights to consider formality unnecessary. "Heard you had an interesting conversation with the general," he said without preamble. Zara studied her wingman's face, looking for signs of knowledge he shouldn't possess. Reaper had always been politically astute, the kind of pilot who understood that advancement required managing relationships as carefully as aircraft. His survival of their crash had followed proper protocols: ejection at optimal altitude, emergency beacon activation, textbook water survival until rescue. Her survival had been something else entirely. "How much do you know?" "Enough to understand why they pulled me from flight status pending psychological evaluation." Reaper's air quotes carried bitter humor. "Apparently, losing your wingman in impossible weather conditions can be traumatic. They're concerned about my ability to trust future flying partners." "And are they right to be concerned?" "That depends on whether you're still my wingman or something else entirely." Reaper leaned forward, his expression serious despite his casual tone. "I've been flying with you for 2 years, Ghostwing. I know when you're holding back in training exercises. I know you read weather patterns like other people read newspapers. I know you've never pushed your aircraft to its actual limits because you're afraid of what people might think." The observation stung precisely because it was accurate. Zara had spent her entire career moderating her abilities, flying well enough to earn respect but not so well as to attract unwanted attention. She'd convinced herself this was tactical wisdom, but Reaper's words forced her to acknowledge it might have been cowardice disguised as strategy. "If I told you that everything you think you know about American military capabilities is incomplete, what would you say?" "I'd say it's about time someone admitted it." Reaper stood up, moving to her small window that looked out over Elmendorf's flight line. "Half the missions we've flown in the past year have been positioned as training exercises, but the targets we've surveilled have been too specific, too current, too strategically important. Someone's been using routine patrols to gather intelligence on situations that don't officially exist." Zara joined him at the window, where they could see aircraft being prepared for evening training flights. Normal operations conducted by normal pilots who believed their work was exactly what it appeared to be. The simplicity of that world suddenly seemed precious and fragile, something she was about to lose forever. "If I accept Hawthorne's offer, I can't tell you what I'll be doing. I can't explain why I survived when I should have died. I can't even guarantee that we'll see each other again in any official capacity. But you'll finally get to find out what you're actually capable of." The statement hung between them like a challenge and a blessing. Reaper had identified the choice she was really facing: safety through limitation versus growth through risk. Her uncle had made the same choice 38 years ago, trading the security of conventional assignments for the chance to test technology that might change warfare itself. "The general wants an answer by tomorrow morning." "Then you'd better get some sleep. You've got a big decision to make." Reaper headed toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, Ghostwing, I've never flown with anyone who belonged in the sky the way you do. Whatever they're offering you, it's probably not enough." The next morning brought Arctic clarity that made the world look sharp enough to cut. Zara stood on Elmendorf's runway at 600 hours, watching ground crews prepare aircraft for the day's training missions. The routine operations looked different now, mechanical motions performed by people who didn't understand the larger games being played above their security clearances. General Hawthorne arrived precisely on time, approaching across the tarmac with the measured pace of someone who'd already decided how this conversation would end. She carried a leather briefing case that undoubtedly contained documents that would formalize whatever decision Zara made in the next few minutes. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander. I trust you've considered my offer." "I have, General, but I need to understand something first." Zara turned from watching the aircraft to face Hawthorne directly. "My uncle died because two governments couldn't admit they were cooperating. Are you asking me to repeat his mistakes, or are you offering something different?" "That's an interesting question." Hawthorne set her briefing case on a nearby equipment cart, using the gesture to buy time for consideration. "Your uncle's program failed because it was designed as a bridge between adversaries who weren't ready to trust each other. The current program exists because those same adversaries realize they face common threats that require unprecedented cooperation." Meaning? Meaning Tempest Wing operates with joint authorization from NATO, Russian Federation, and Chinese military commands. The weather modification technology your uncle died testing is now used to prevent natural disasters, support humanitarian operations, and maintain atmospheric stability in regions affected by climate change. Hawthorne opened her briefing case, removing documents that bore classification markings Zara had never seen before. The secrecy isn't about hiding cooperation. It's about protecting cooperation from political forces that would exploit it for domestic advantage. The revelation fundamentally altered Zara's understanding of what she was being offered. Instead of joining another military program designed to provide American advantages over foreign adversaries, she was being invited into an international effort that treated atmospheric management as a global commons requiring collaborative stewardship. How many people know the truth about current operations? Fewer than 60, across all participating governments. Presidents and prime ministers receive summary briefings. Military commanders know only what their specific roles require. The pilots and support staff understand that their missions prevent catastrophic weather events, but not that their success depends on coordination with foreign military assets. Zara studied the documents Hawthorne had laid out, seeing organizational charts that defied traditional concepts of national military structure. American pilots working with Russian meteorologists. Chinese atmospheric scientists sharing data with European Union climate specialists. Military capabilities being used to address challenges that no single nation could manage independently. What happens to Lieutenant Commander Zara Volkov if I accept this assignment? She receives promotion to full commander and assignment to a classified program that doesn't appear in official Navy records. Her service record will show routine administrative duties, while her actual work contributes to global atmospheric stability. Hawthorne handed Zara a pen with the weight of finality. "Your signature commits you to operations that will never be publicly acknowledged, working with people whose governments officially consider America a strategic competitor." Zara took the pen, feeling its weight against her fingers like a compass needle finding magnetic north. Her uncle had died pursuing a vision of international cooperation that had been decades ahead of its time. She was being offered the chance to make that vision operational reality, to use her inherited abilities in service of challenges that transcended national boundaries. The first aircraft of Tempest Wing looked like evolution made manifest in titanium and carbon fiber. Commander Zara Volkov stood in a hangar that officially didn't exist, studying the F-35 variant that would become her primary aircraft for operations that would never appear in any historical record. The modifications were extensive enough to qualify it as an entirely new aircraft type. Enlarged engine intakes for high-altitude operations, wing-mounted atmospheric manipulation pods, sensor arrays that could read pressure differentials across hundreds of square miles. Beautiful, isn't she? The voice belonged to Dr. Alina Petrov, the program's senior atmospheric physicist, and one of the few people cleared to know the full scope of Tempest Wing operations. Her Russian accent carried the precise diction of someone who'd learned English through technical journals rather than casual conversation. Your uncle would have appreciated the elegance of the integration. Zara had been wondering when someone would mention her family connection explicitly. The program's leadership had been circumspect during her initial briefings, focusing on technical capabilities rather than historical context. Dr. Petrov's directness was either refreshing honesty or a test of her emotional stability. Did you know him? I knew his work. My father was part of the original weather modification team in the 1980s. He used to say that Major Volkov flew like he was having conversations with the sky itself, not fighting the weather, but negotiating with it. Petrov activated the hangar's overhead lighting, revealing details of the aircraft that hadn't been visible in shadow. We've tried to preserve that philosophy in the current systems. The aircraft's cockpit featured displays that resembled meteorological equipment more than traditional aviation instruments. Atmospheric pressure readings, ionospheric density measurements, electromagnetic field variations, data streams that would allow a pilot to read environmental conditions with unprecedented precision. The integration was seamless enough to suggest years of development, refinement based on operational experience that Zara was only beginning to understand. How long has this specific program been operational? 15 years of active missions, storm mitigation, atmospheric research, humanitarian support in regions affected by extreme weather events. Petrov handed Zara a tablet displaying mission summaries that read like climate science fiction. Last year alone, we prevented 4 potential Category 5 hurricanes from reaching populated areas, dissipated drought conditions across 3 African nations, and maintained atmospheric stability during volcanic events that could have disrupted global air travel. The scope of operations was staggering, representing the kind of large-scale environmental management that climate scientists had been proposing for decades, but governments had been too politically fragmented to attempt. Tempest Wing wasn't just a military program. It was planetary infrastructure disguised as defense spending. What's the success rate? 97% for storm mitigation, 85% for drought intervention, 99% for atmospheric stability operations. Petrov's statistics carried the pride of someone describing achievements that would never receive public recognition. The failures have been due to equipment limitations rather than operational errors. This new aircraft generation should improve our capabilities significantly. Zara climbed into the cockpit, settling into a seat that had been custom-fitted to her physical specifications. The ergonomics felt perfect, as if the aircraft had been designed specifically for her hands and reflexes. Every control surface fell naturally under her fingers, every display positioned for optimal visibility during complex atmospheric navigation. The neural interface will take some adjustment, Petrov warned from the hangar floor. The aircraft's atmospheric sensors are integrated with pilot biometrics to optimize performance during high-stress operations. It reads your physiological responses and adjusts flight characteristics accordingly. The training regimen for Tempest Wing operations proved more demanding than anything Zara had experienced during her conventional naval career. Physical conditioning that prepared pilots for extended high-altitude flight. Meteorological education that qualified them as professional atmospheric scientists, language training that enabled communication with international teams during joint operations, combat medicine certification for humanitarian missions in hostile environments. But the most challenging aspect was psychological, learning to think beyond national interests while maintaining operational security that prevented disclosure to fellow American military personnel. Zara found herself studying weather patterns over regions where American and Russian naval forces conducted routine patrols, planning interventions that would benefit both sides without either government understanding the scope of cooperation involved. Her training partner was Captain Liu Wei, a Chinese Air Force pilot whose technical skills were matched by diplomatic sophistication that made collaboration feel natural rather than politically fraught. They spent hours in joint simulation exercises, learning to coordinate atmospheric modifications across vast geographic areas while maintaining radio silence that preserved plausible deniability for their respective governments. Your uncle's navigation techniques are still taught in our training program, Liu mentioned during a break between simulation runs. Chinese atmospheric physics incorporated his pressure reading methods into our weather prediction models. His death was mourned by people he never knew existed. The comment crystallized something that had been bothering Zara throughout her training: the disconnect between official history and operational reality. Major Yuki Volkov had been forgotten by American military records, but his innovations had influenced atmospheric science development across multiple nations. His death had ended one program while inspiring others, his sacrifice rippling through decades of scientific advancement in ways that no government had bothered to document. How many other connections exist that we don't know about? Probably hundreds. Military technology development has been more collaborative than our governments admit, especially in areas where national advantages are less important than species survival. Liu activated another simulation scenario, this one involving coordinated response to a hypothetical volcanic eruption. Climate change has made atmospheric cooperation necessary regardless of political preferences. They spent the next 4 hours practicing techniques that would allow them to maintain breathable air quality across hundreds of square miles, while volcanic ash threatened to disrupt global transportation networks. The operation required precision coordination between Chinese ground-based ionospheric heaters, American aircraft-mounted atmospheric processors, and Russian satellite-guided weather monitoring systems. Success meant millions of people would continue breathing clean air, while international air travel remained operational. Failure meant economic disruption that could trigger political instability across multiple continents. The stakes made traditional military objectives seem narrow by comparison. Zara's first operational mission launched from a base that didn't appear on any official maps, located in international waters aboard a platform that multiple governments had agreed to forget. The briefing had been conducted by personnel whose uniforms bore no national insignia, whose accents reflected the kind of international education that made national identity seem quaint rather than definitive. Hurricane Elena was tracking toward the Caribbean with sustained winds approaching 200 miles per hour, following a path that would devastate multiple island nations before making landfall on the American Gulf Coast. Conventional weather forecasting predicted catastrophic damage, population displacement that would create refugee crises across the Western Hemisphere, and economic disruption that would affect global markets for years. Tempest Wing's mission was to reduce Elena's intensity to Category 2 strength while steering it away from populated areas, an intervention that would save thousands of lives while preserving economic stability across multiple nations. The operation would require 4 aircraft working in coordinated formation across a 1,000-mile operational area, using atmospheric modification techniques that had been refined through 15 years of classified development. Zara's role was primary atmospheric navigation, using her inherited ability to read pressure patterns for guiding the formation through hurricane conditions that would challenge the most sophisticated meteorological equipment. Her aircraft's sensors could detect pressure variations that conventional instruments would miss, but success would depend on integrating technical data with intuitive understanding of atmospheric behavior. Ghostwing, this is control. Whether modification systems are online, atmospheric conditions within acceptable parameters for intervention operations. The voice belonged to Dr. Petrov, coordinating the mission from a command center that monitored weather patterns across the entire Atlantic basin. Her Russian accent was barely detectable through encrypted communications, but Zara found its familiarity reassuring as they approached the most dangerous flying she'd ever attempted. Control, Ghostwing. Formation is established. Beginning approach to intervention coordinates. The hurricane's outer bands hit their formation like invisible mountains, turbulence that would have torn conventional aircraft apart. But Tempest Wing's modified F-35s had been designed for this environment, their atmospheric processors already beginning to seed Alina's eyewall with chemical compounds that would disrupt the storm's energy circulation. Through her cockpit windows, Zara could see lightning that illuminated cloud formations stretching to the edge of space. The hurricane's beauty was terrifying, natural forces operating on scales that made human civilization seem fragile and temporary. But her instruments showed the subtle changes their intervention was creating, pressure differentials that would gradually weaken Alina's destructive potential. Formation, this is Ghostwing. Pressure gradient is responding to modification. Recommend 15-degree course adjustment to optimize dispersal pattern. Her formation partners acknowledged the navigation change, their aircraft adjusting position with precision that reflected months of joint training. Captain Liu Wei was flying wing position, his atmospheric sensors confirming the pressure readings that guided their flight path. 2 European pilots completed the formation, their aircraft equipped with specialized ionospheric heating equipment that complemented the American weather modification systems. 4 hours into the mission, Hurricane Alina's sustained winds had dropped to 150 miles per hour. 8 hours later, the storm was tracking away from populated areas, its projected path taking it over open ocean where it would dissipate naturally. By the time Alina made final landfall, it had weakened to tropical storm status, bringing beneficial rainfall to drought-affected regions rather than catastrophic destruction. The mission's success would never be officially acknowledged. Weather services would credit natural atmospheric conditions for Alina's unexpected weakening. Emergency management officials would congratulate themselves on preparation efforts that hadn't been needed. Insurance companies would revise their hurricane models without understanding why their predictions had been inaccurate. But in classified facilities across 4 continents, atmospheric scientists would study Alina's behavior, refining techniques that could prevent future catastrophic storms. Military commanders would file reports that described successful completion of humanitarian operations that officially hadn't occurred. And families in the Caribbean would never know that their lives had been saved by international cooperation that their governments would never admit existed. Zara returned to base understanding that she'd participated in the kind of operation her uncle had died trying to make possible, military technology used for planetary protection rather than national advantage. The satisfaction was deeper than anything she'd experienced during conventional naval missions, the knowledge that her skills had prevented suffering rather than simply prepared for conflict. The debriefing lasted 6 hours, with technical analysis that would influence atmospheric modification protocols for years to come. But the moment that stayed with Zara was Dr. Petrov's final comment, delivered with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose work had measurable positive impact on human welfare. Your uncle would have been proud, Commander. You flew that mission exactly the way he would have approached it, not fighting the storm, but learning to dance with it until it forgot how to be dangerous. 6 months into her assignment with Tempest Wing, Commander Zara Volkov had flown operations across 4 continents, participated in atmospheric interventions that prevented 3 natural disasters, and learned to navigate political complexities that made hurricane formation seem straightforward by comparison. Her aircraft had become an extension of her nervous system, its atmospheric sensors integrated with her inherited ability to read weather patterns in ways that amazed even the program's most experienced scientists. But success in classified operations carried unexpected isolation. Her friends from conventional naval service believed she'd been assigned to routine administrative duties, a career-limiting posting that explained her absence from normal rotation cycles. She couldn't explain her work to family members, couldn't share the satisfaction of missions that saved lives on scales that dwarfed traditional military objectives. The isolation was manageable until the morning Admiral Chen called with news that changed everything about her understanding of Tempest Wing's political situation. She was conducting routine aircraft maintenance when the encrypted communication came through, Chen's voice carrying tension that made her hands still on the atmospheric sensor array she'd been calibrating. "Commander, we have a situation. The President is demanding a full briefing on our hurricane modification capabilities." The implications hit Zara like decompression at altitude, sudden, disorienting, and potentially fatal. Presidential awareness meant political exposure, the kind of high-level attention that could destroy international cooperation if not managed with exceptional care. 3 American administrations had maintained plausible deniability about Tempest Wing operations, understanding that atmospheric cooperation required protection from domestic political pressures. How much does he know? Enough to ask dangerous questions. Someone leaked intelligence reports about Alina's modification, described our capabilities in language that suggests access to classified technical specifications. Chen's voice carried the weight of someone calculating risks that,